You're such an asshole.
Morning, children. It's always good to get a little bit of work done. Just in between, while everyone else is sleeping, get the work done. And then you don't have big work later on. I had a question, very quick for a video response. During the Obama administration about 2014, my parents were saying that Obama was mentioning that the economy is growing. However, he wasn't counting the extra 1.5% on top of the 2% growth for people trying to get jobs. Something like that you probably don't know. You probably know, I don't remember. I don't remember the economy ever growing more than 2% under Obama. There were a couple quarters where it did grow above that. But let me read so I understand. He said that the economy is growing, however, he wasn't counting the extra 1.5% on the 2% growth for people trying to get jobs. My point is, you mentioned about a year ago that in the 1950s, the economy was growing at 4% economic growth, and now it's half. It's roughly half. It's more like 60%. Ezra and Paul Richards' retirement, along with other surveys in CH2. My question would be, how do you calculate these formulas to find the current economic growth and adjustment for inflation with all your books and studies? I doubt they are articled, because articles are just biased and either have limited or current information. I mean, let me know your name and the name and price, or name your price for this video response. I think it would be beneficial for all your viewers out there. Well, where I go is I go to the St. Louis Federal Reserve, FRED database. And if you guys are looking for any economic data, that is pretty much the go-to place. There are other government agencies that publish economic data and then feed that to the St. Louis Federal Reserve FRED database, like the Bureau of Labor Statistics, Bureau of Economic Analysis, other Federal Reserve banks. But that is my go-to source, and they have all the standard and many more economic variables. And the way they present, well, they'll present every incarnation and variation of GDP you ever wanted. Nominal, real, quarter over quarter, year over year. And I think what the official economic growth is they do year over year annualized. So when they say GDP this quarter, when you hear it in the news, they say it's 3%. That means the economy didn't grow that quarter at 3%. That means that the real economy, adjusted for inflation, that quarter was growing at 3%, at the rate per year, at 3% a year. That doesn't mean it actually grew 3% in that quarter. It means if that rate were to continue for the rest of the year, for the next three quarters rather, then you'd have 3% economic growth. So they do annualize it, saying this is the rate we're growing at. And then it's usually when they present it in the public, it's always adjusted for inflation. Because you can look at nominal GDP, but that's pointless. You want to look at real GDP. So that's why I get the information. That's where they're, how they're calculating it. Yeah, so I personally don't calculate it. How they do calculate it, they have economists, I think it is the Bureau of Economic Analysis that's in charge. Those are the economists that actually calculate GDP. And I forgot how they do it. It's the methodology, which I'm sure is horrifically boring. I do trust the figures. I would not trust China and Venezuela and all those other countries, but I do trust the methodologies used by the European Union, OECD, US, any established first world countries. I believe their figures. I'm just trying to figure out if there was any more of a question here. How do you calculate these formulas? You want to kind of tell the articles? Yeah, so that's it. Any data series, any economic statistics you want to look up and figure out how they're calculated, if it's in the United States, it's one of like maybe 4 possible places. FRED database, and they always tell you the methodology. There's a link down below. Bureau of Economic Analysis, Bureau of Labor Statistics, and other Federal Reserve banks. I'm sure there's other departments and bureaus that calculate economic data. But usually, if they're good, and they are, they'll tell you the methodology for calculating it. You can look it up online. But usually there's a link right there below. So that's it. That's how GDP is calculated and what it means. Oh, that's what I want to talk about. The historic economic growth. The way I calculate, I've done this chart many times before where I show you how economic growth is declining. And what I do is I do a rolling 20-year average. So I take the previous 10 years and the next 10 years, and I average it to that center data point. I just take the average, and then I average it out over the course of time. And between 1940, I started recording, 47 and 1967, if you average those 2 decades, you get 4.25% economic growth. And it goes up and down, but it generally trends down to where today we're at around 2.25. I won't go into that as to why, because there's many reasons why. We're just lazy socialist fucks is what it boils down to. And the government's getting bigger. And when you have a larger percentage of the economy being government, that tends not to be efficient as the private sector. But that's how I calculate those figures. And I pull the data by which, from the Fred database, real GDP growth. So, all right, questions, answers, ASOConsulting.com. Links down below. We'll see you guys later. Toodles.